Good evening, everyone. I hope you had a fantastic weekend and welcome to the Lavigne Show. Really great to have you here. Today, we have a great guest here, former Sheriff Richard Mack from Arizona, who will be speaking to the benefits of having a sheriff's in comparison to our regular police force, his history, what he stood up for. One of the things I want to share with you is that he not only has been was a sheriff for many, many years, but he is also the founder and president of the Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association. So this is a gentleman that has stood up to try and make a difference and to probably as well uphold the laws of his state. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and bring Mr. Sheriff Mack on. Hi there. How are you doing today?
Doing really well, Paula. And how do you say your last name?
Lavigne.
Lavigne. Okay. Well, that's
and if you're French, you would say Lavigne, but Lavigne.
May we.
May we, yes. But thank you very much for joining us. And so tell us who you are, your overall, the summary of your history within the sheriff's office.
Well, I spent 20 years in law enforcement, and I started at the very bottom. When I was working my way through college, I got a part-time job with the Provo Police Department in Utah, and I became a parking enforcement cadet. And the vernacular of that is meter maid, so I went around with chalk and marked tires, and 2 or 3 hours later I'd come back, and if the chalk tire was still there, I left a ticket on the car. And then I became a patrol officer, and that started in 1979. And I was a patrol officer for about 5 years. Then I got promoted to corporal, and then I got promoted to sergeant. And back up about 3 years, though, I was asked, they can't force you to do this. And they talked to my wife and me about being an undercover narcotics agent. And that was horrible. My wife didn't want to do it. And I didn't really either, because you had to smoke and drink. And if you had to save your identity, smoke marijuana, because marijuana was everywhere. And if you're the only one in a room that's passing around marijuana and you're the only one that doesn't smoke it, you're kind of going to give yourself away.
Right.
So, but I never smoked marijuana in my life except during this time. So the only time I ever smoked pot in my life was when I was a police officer. So
go figure.
Go figure the irony of that. I didn't party, and so I couldn't inhale cigarette smoke. So I had to learn how to fake it, because my lungs were just too virgin. I could not inhale cigarette smoke without coughing my guts out. So ironically, I could inhale marijuana. And I believe it was because it's more natural. It's an herb, and it doesn't have all the tar and nicotine in it that cigarettes do. So I could inhale that. But again, the times that I smoked that were actually inhaled were very, very seldom. But I did a few times. If you use a bong or some of the pipes that used, it was almost impossible to fake it. But I will say my overall impression of marijuana was that it was absolutely no big deal. And I just didn't see why people were so drawn to it. But no one in this world hates drug abuse more than I do. And so I learned a lot living within the drug culture and the socioeconomic culture of drug users. Really taught me a lot. I've never learned so much in my life. But I was not allowed to see my 3 small children, and I was not allowed to see my wife or be with her in public. So it was very rare that I got to go home, but I did. Sometimes I'd walk home, sneak home at night in kind of the back roads. And then I would sneak back to my apartment and then get ready for work the next day.
How long
So
did this continue for? How long were you in the
it was 1
narcotics
year,
department?
1 year.
Okay.
Yeah. But that included everything. That included the court cases and everything. The actual time I spent on the streets, and my name was Gary Layton. And the actual time I spent, I had a driver's license and a car that was registered to Gary Layton. And so we had a lot of participation with the state and the DMV and all that. But that lasted about 6 or 7, 8 months. And then we got the court cases already. And you have to recognize the severity of this on our marriage, because my wife, this was before cell phones, and my wife at times would not hear from me
Right.
for 3 or 4 days. And she would just be wondering if I was lying dead in the street somewhere or what was going on. When I could, I would let my liaison officer know where I was and what I was doing, but which I always had to do. And then my wife could call him and did. But there was a few times, there was one particular weekend where I was working a very big deal, and I was out of pocket. I was with them. I was at parties and trying to work some big drug sales. So I will say this too. It taught me a lot about drug abuse, and I no longer support the drug war. I don't. I think the drug war
How so?
It's a farce. The drug war is a farce. We don't take it very seriously, and we're just spinning our wheels. We're not getting rid of drugs, and we never have. And let me ask you or the public in general, or I've asked this to cops who absolutely do not believe we should legalize drugs or stop the drug war. And I'll say, why don't you explain to the American people how successful the drug war has been? Go ahead. We spend $100 billion a year and we've accomplished nothing. What have we accomplished? Have we stopped anybody from using drugs in this country? No.
Well, let me ask you this with your reoccurred president here, President Trump, and he has declared a war on drugs and calling the cartels terrorists. What do
Well, I
you
didn't hear him say the war on drugs. I heard him say the war that he declared the cartels to be international terrorists. I agree with
Okay.
that. They are. And the exploitation conducted by the cartels is absolutely heinous. Don't get me wrong. Like I said, no one hates drug abuse more than I do. But if we're really going to do something about it, we've got to first admit what we've been doing has failed and failed miserably. And then let's get back to the drawing board as to what we can really do to get drugs out of our culture and out of our communities.
I would definitely agree. So, with the assumption that when he named the cartels terrorists, one of the sources or resources that the cartel provides are drugs, would you say that he is this just a repeat of yet another president with the war on drugs, or do you think that he does have, knowing that this is his final term, do you think he's going to really make a push for change and try to remove the drugs, or at least curb the drugs within the U.S.?
Well, first of all, we have to have the banana republics government, Mexico and the rest of them in Latin America. We have to have their cooperation. And some of those countries are entirely run by cartels. And I actually, about 10 years ago, I went to a training seminar at the University of Arizona. And there were about 15 professors from major colleges in Mexico. And I got to know them pretty well, and I got along with them pretty well because I speak very good English, very good Spanish. And I asked all of them, every single one of them, 12 to 15 of them. I said, how much of the government in Latin America, how much of the government, and they were all from Mexico. So I said, how much of your Mexican government is run and controlled by the cartels. Every single one of them answered without hesitation and in unison. They said 100%. 100%. So I don't trust the governments down there. The gross domestic product of these countries would not be the same without the proliferation and economic overflow of drugs. And then look at these countries like Mexico. They would not help us stop fentanyl and other drugs, any drugs. They would not do it. Now there seems to be some cooperation now because of what Trump is doing with the tariffs and what we're doing to try to work together. And maybe now they're going to try, because the president of Mexico said she was going to send 10,000 troops to our border or to their border and try to stop the flow of drugs and human trafficking, which is probably the most heinous crime in the world, trafficking little children throughout the world. And, they lost some 350,000, 400,000 children. I can tell you where they all are. They got sold into slavery, into sex slavery. And this is how heinous these people are. They're without consciences. They're without
or
shame.
care for human life. Yeah, I would agree. I would agree.
And these are the worst criminals in the world. And yet, what are the Latin American countries doing to try to stop this? I guarantee you Venezuela is doing nothing. I guarantee you whatever Cuba might be doing, they're not trying to get rid of these problems. And it's going to take some real effort.
Yeah, I would add, I think Trump is not only looking south of the border, but north of the border as well, because he has given the shout out to Canada, and he's spoken to our Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, basically saying, look, you need to firm up your borders. And it's our Premier Danielle Smith, who I believe is the only premier in the country who has stepped forward and said, okay, we're going to be setting up a 2-kilometer deep barrier where we will be patrolling the Montana-Alberta border with sheriffs. And one of the big things about that is that she is not using local police, and she's not using the RCMP, because actually Alberta doesn't have really its own police force. We have to use the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, our federal officers, and she's chosen not to bring them in. She's using sheriffs for this job, which to us makes us realize, well, why utilize that branch of policing? Do you not trust the others, the more, the Canadian, the Mounties? So she's stepped up to say that, okay, look, we hear you, because she was down in Mar-a-Lago before the inauguration. So, and she's had photos taken with Trump. And so our understanding is that, yeah, she's had the conversations. They've all had conversations behind the scenes, but she's had the conversations and said, look, and Trump says, this is what we're looking for. And we want to firm up our border because, yes, there are drugs, there are human trafficking going on between the north and the northern borders. So you need to do something about it.
When was the last time any of the Democrats expressed concern about human trafficking at any border? Show me one. Show me one. Yeah. And the problem with politics is that it's so corrupt, and that no matter what, the one party of the major two parties, they'll lie about the other one because that's what they think that's what they're supposed to do. Instead of really standing on principle and maybe working together on issues of mutual concern, they do not care about the American people. They do not care about the crime or anything else. These politicians only care about the next donation to their campaign or the next election. That's all they care about. And they're a bunch of crooks. They're absolutely without shame or conscience. And I'm tired of both parties. I will admit that the Republicans are usually little bit better than the Democrats, but they both are responsible for huge amounts to our national debt, which is absolutely unsustainable. and it's totally corrupt. And right now, in the United States of America, every penny that comes from federal income tax is only used to pay the interest on this corrupt debt that we have in this country. That's it.
Yeah.
Our taxes don't go to any infrastructure, don't go to help Americans first, don't go to help anyone. It only goes to pay the interest on this horrible corrupt debt that these corrupt politicians have amassed during the past 40, 50, 60 years. And it is so corrupt, and we let them get away with it. And the American people have got to wake up and stop voting for these people. Oh, and one other timeout. I didn't finish with my bio.
I was going to say, because I was going to say, we stopped after this conversation. We can go back to your experience within the cartel for the
I will say
narcotics for a year.
I've done everything in law enforcement imaginable, except I've never committed an act of violence against another human being. I've never beat anybody.
You've never fired your gun?
I've never fired my gun. I should have one time. I really should have. But my deputy and I had very good cover, and he had his 10-year-old son standing next to him. And I just could not do it and kill this man in front of his son. So I told my deputy, I said, hey, if it gets any crazier than this, you let your conscience be your guide. But we were out in the parking lot. He didn't even see us. And he was in his home. And so we finally talked him into putting the gun down. We told his son to tell him to put the gun down. His son was absolutely mortified, scared to death. And he was very traumatized, the poor little kid.
As a 10-year-old would be.
Yeah, of course. And so, again, but I've never even beat anybody up. I have never slapped another human being. I've never slugged another human being. Look, I had to go to bar fights, and I'm a big guy, and most of them didn't want to fight me. And I prided myself in talking to people into jail, not beating them into jail. And when I stopped fights, I pinned them. A couple of guys I tackled. Another shoplifter was running out of a building and he didn't see me. It was a very foggy night, and I tackled him. But that's where it ended. That's where it ended. And I didn't exaggerate any of it. And I didn't want to beat people up, and I didn't. I'm grateful that I can look back at a 20-year career and say I never shot anybody and I never mistreated anybody ever. And I was always high in arrests, especially DUIs, drunk driving. I never gave breaks on drunk driving. I don't care who you are. If you're drunk driving, you're going to jail. But this is also something that came to me when I was writing a lady a ticket. I realized that ticket writing was just abuse, and it was just, I felt like a tax collector. Revenue generation is not what cops are for. And we're part of a $9 billion a year industry called traffic citations. And we need to be fair and honest with people, and not just be out there gouging them for more money. And very rarely did any of the tickets I wrote before I woke up and decided what government was really supposed to be doing and how cops were supposed to be helping people, not gouging them for more money. Before that, I realized finally that true public service is what I wanted to be a part of. And when I started studying that issue, I ran smack in the face of the oath of office, which is to our Constitution. We swear to the people we work for that we will uphold and defend, protect and preserve the United States Constitution. That's my job. That is my job as a cop. And so I started studying the Constitution. I'm very proficient in the Constitution, especially the Bill of Rights. And I think every police officer in the world should be concerned and dedicated to protecting civil rights. That's what we're here for. And so then I ran for sheriff in 1988. I moved home to Arizona, where my wife and I were both from. And we got elected miraculously. I hadn't even lived in my hometown for 12 years. I'd never been in law enforcement or government work in my hometown. I had some good recognition as an all-star athlete, but that was it. My father worked there as an FBI agent, and he had a good name recognition, and I think that helped a little bit. But I won the first time. I won re-election in 1992, and then in 1994, I became the first sheriff in American history to launch a major lawsuit against the federal government, take it all the way to the United States Supreme Court, and win. And so
Wonderful.
if anybody wants to look up that case, you should. But I have a review of the case in this little booklet. It fits right in your shirt pocket. It's only 16 pages long. You can read it in 10 minutes.
And I'll bring it up here.
Everybody should be studying that. And everybody should purchase those. Look, there's no
for those of you in the U.S. For those of you in the U.S.
We can do orders elsewhere, but we'd have to charge you double the postage. But and we just sent some to a guy in Canada, and what we did is we had to send it FedEx. Mm-hmm. So that worked. But
why don't we segue now then, because since I've just gone ahead and shared that site, so let me go ahead and bring this up. And why don't you explain to us what is this website and why did you create the Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association? Because you are the founder and president of it.
Yeah, I'm the founder and president. It was born out of this lawsuit. It was born out of this case. And stop right there. Yeah, look right there. We actually have a fundraiser going on with these badges. Okay. And it's the Spirit of 76. Those are pure leather wallets, just like detectives carry anywhere. It is 100% bronze metal that created those badges, just like any police officer has or detective. And those are $760. The Spirit of 76. Yes, we're charging extra, and that's kind of expensive, I admit. But if anybody would like one of those, we can get those to you as well. And just let us know. But it's $760 for anybody in the United States. We pay the shipping. Obviously, to get that to you, you might have to pay a couple $100 postage. But we'll get it to you as best we can. And in fact, the one guy that bought one from Canada, it got sent back to us. Because it had insufficient postage, and then we sent it back to him FedEx, and it worked just fine. So
wonderful.
Anyway, we have books that like especially this one. If you want to read the most powerful states' rights, state sovereignty, Supreme Court case in the history of America, you want to get a hold of this case. Now, look, they're very inexpensive. They're $3 for $5. And this is absolutely astonishing. But if you want to look up the case on the internet, just Google Mack v. U.S. Now, there was another sheriff who went with me to the Supreme Court, and his name is attached to the case more than mine. But you can Google either sheriff, and the other one was Prince, Printz, and he doesn't live too far from you. He's in Montana and Ravalli County. And he and I have put on age since this case. We won it in June of 1997. So it was known as the Mack Prince case for a while. And then my name got dropped and his stayed. Not sure totally why, but I was the first to file and I started this whole thing. And I'm the only sheriff of the 7 that ended up doing this case. I'm the only one that still promotes it today, because it is essential to the principles of liberty. And that's why I formed the CSPOA. So every sheriff and every public official would wake up to our duty to enforce principles of liberty, to defend principles of liberty, and to defend the civil rights of every person in our jurisdictions. That is our job. I don't care if you're a cop in London or Sydney, Australia, or Quebec, Canada. I don't care. We all have the same responsibility to protect the rights of our citizens. And I wish
you would think, but some of ours swear an oath to themselves and not to the people.
That's why I formed the CSPOA. That's why I formed it. so that everyone would wake up, including the citizenry and the people, that we want a police agency that really does serve us and not just gouge us, but understand that my right, especially my right to keep and bear arms, is something that we promise to protect. And yet now we have over 20,000 gun control laws in America, and
Well, let's
99.9% of them illegal.
Let's backtrack a bit. So you moved the family back to Arizona and you decided to run for sheriff and you were successful. Now, how long is a term?
4 years, and I served 2
4
terms.
years. So you served 2 terms. What then prompted you? What did you see in those 8 years? Because also, congratulations, because you have to be elected, right? The people vote for you.
Correct.
So it's not just a case of you've risen through the ranks and you've had, you've networked. You won the people's vote. What prompted you that after 8 years, you and you said, I think 7 others, to go forward with this lawsuit? Like, what happened?
Oh, well, that's a good question. Yeah, very good question. Well, this was the first time in U.S. history where the federal government decided that one of their gun control laws would be enforced by the sheriffs of the states. And they actually sent federal agents to our Sheriff's Association meeting in Arizona, and they did this in every state. But just so you know, there's 3 states that don't have a sheriff. They do not have sheriffs. And that was Alaska and Hawaii. And when they came into the Union in 1959, they did not establish the office anywhere. And then Connecticut voted the office out about 30 years ago, voted it out of their state. So they only have the police state or state police and then city police. But you see what the problem is? The people. This is supposed to be government by, for, and of the people. And the people elect their sheriffs. They appoint the sheriff through the election process. That's what a constitutional republic is. And that's the people choose their representatives, not some bureaucracy or some other politician. And so that's what I love about the office of sheriff. We only answer to the people, and the only boss that sheriffs have are the people. I don't answer to the governor. I don't answer to the county commissioners. I don't answer to the county attorney. I answer to the people. And that's what makes us a constitutional republic. So this Brady bill, it was called the Brady bill, and the sheriffs had to conduct background checks according to federal law, which I'm not subject to, but we had to do background checks on every single person who wanted to buy a gun. They had to have waiting periods, and then we had to check their background and see if they were mental cases or criminals or prohibited felons. And I said, one, the federal government cannot tell me what to do. I don't work for you. You can't hire me. You can't fire me. And they get this. Inside the Brady bill was a provision that whoever knowingly failed to comply was subject to a year in prison or a $10,000 fine or both.
Wow.
So all of the sheriffs were really incensed by this, but there was only one in the entire country out of over 3,000 sheriffs that actually did something about it. And I sued the federal government. And then after I filed my suit, about a month later, Sheriff Prince from Montana joined in the lawsuit. And then one from Texas, one from Louisiana, one from Mississippi, one from Vermont, one from Wyoming, and Prince from Montana. So there were 7 of us. And to be honest, it cost me my 3rd election. And ever since then, I've been traveling the country. I stopped for about 5 years and taught high school. But I still did a lot of tours even during then. But I just kind of wanted to slow down. I had a heart attack, and I thought maybe I better look at a different career. But when COVID hit, we got so many requests for speaking engagements all across the country. I had to quit teaching in order to have enough time to do them all. And I'm really glad I did. And that's still what I do full time. And the CSPOA stays in business because of the American people or people around the world. Anybody can make a donation. And people from other countries have. several times. But we're funded by the people, and most of them in the United States.
No, that's wonderful, and it's nice to see. And I'm looking at the comments within the chat and our platforms, and there's a lot of jealousy from us Canadians. There's a lot of jealousy. Yeah, comment here from Donna on Facebook. We only wish that this was the case in Canada.
Yeah,
Like it's just this is what we
everybody
wish. Like
wants to
I'm
be
hearing
free.
it as well. It's like yeah,
Yeah, of
exactly.
course. And liberty
So
is first. It's supposed to be first. Okay. And in
yeah,
my presentation, I talk about Rosa Parks. Are you familiar with her?
yes, yes.
Well, she refused to give her seat to a white man, and then she got arrested for it. And to be honest, I don't like saying this that much because it shows my age. But it was December 1st, 1955, when she was arrested in Montgomery, Alabama, for not giving her seat to a white man. I was 3 years old, living in Arizona, where I was going to be sheriff someday, and in my hometown. And I ask every cop now that is familiar with that situation, if you could go back into time, Mr. or Ms. Police Officer, and you got on that bus to take care of the situation, would you arrest Rosa Parks? Would you arrest this citizen for refusing to give her seat to a white man? Are you totally out of your mind? Because she was arrested by 2 cops. But what should have happened that day? The cops should have shaken her hand, escorted her home safely, and then given her family extra patrol and protection to make sure that no KK Knights or anybody else messed with or attacked her family. That is a true police officer. That is a peace officer. And that is a true protector of the people. And that is what we're supposed to be doing.
I don't disagree. Now, if you could just explain to me, what is the difference between a sheriff and a police officer, if anything?
They all take the same oath, and most of them enforce the same laws. But the chief of police, for whom a police officer works, is appointed. He doesn't answer to the people. He answers to the town manager or to the city council. But the sheriff is elected, and he runs a jail, and the city police and other police officers do not run a jail. They use our jail, is what usually happens. And so we all take the same oath to uphold and defend the Constitution, but to keep his job, the chief of police has to please the city council. And many of those don't really give a hoot about the Constitution.
So how does the sheriffs and police force, how are they dispersed within a state? So it's not just like one state is not going to be just only sheriffs. There's going to be a mixture. How does that work?
Another good question. Yeah, thank you for that. Well, first of all, there were 3 city police departments inside my county when I was sheriff. And I met with them every month. We'd meet and have lunch together, usually Mexican food. That's great stuff in Arizona. And we would discuss this because, one, we dispatched for them. They didn't see any necessity of everybody hiring their own dispatch. And like I said, we only run one jail. So we provide that service to all of them. And we had a gentleman's agreement that anything and everything within the city limits of those 3 cities, the police departments took those calls, and they handled the family fights or the DUIs or whatever. They handled all the calls for police inside the city limits of their towns. On the other hand, we handled all the calls outside the city limits and throughout the entire county.
Okay.
And so that worked out pretty well. And if there were problems, we would sit down and discuss it. But if a deputy sheriff is inside the city limits of Safford and he saw a crime, obviously he could take action. If he wanted to turn it over to the police department, he could, or he could just take care of it and then let them know what he did.
So here's a quick question then. When it comes to you sharing your infrastructure, the jails and the communications, um, who funded you? Who, like, would you get extra funding because you were providing the infrastructure to the police, or like how would
They
that
would
work?
pay. They paid for the jail service and they paid for the dispatch service. Other than that, you're funded by the tax dollars of the people inside the city limits. So the city of Safford had a budget for their police department, and the county had a budget for the sheriff's office.
Hmm.
And that's where I got my paycheck, and the rest of my 15 deputies, that's where they got their paycheck.
Okay, so now let's jump forward. So you saw, after your 8 years, you saw this law, and you decided you and the other states um, stepped up for this lawsuit. How long did the whole to get to the final verdict, so to speak? How
Well,
long did that take?
you start in the district court, and that mine was in Tucson, Arizona, which was about an hour and a half from my home. And then all of us sheriffs, 6 out of the 7, all won at the district court. And so the federal government appealed, and then we lost at the next one because it's the most overturned court in America. It's the Ninth Circuit, which is located in San Francisco. It's a very liberal court, and we did not believe we were going to win. But the sheriff from Texas and the one in Louisiana, Sheriff Coog and Sheriff Romero, they won in Louisiana, in New Orleans. And so it was the exact same case, and complete opposite rulings were rendered by the appellate court, called circuit court. And my lawyer said that's going to guarantee us a trip to the Supreme Court. And indeed, December of 1996, Sheriff Prince and I appeared at the U.S. Supreme Court, and each side, the federal government was given 30 minutes, and our lawyers were given 30 minutes. And then about 6 months later, we won. And it was one of the happiest days of my life. It made
Well done.
everything worthwhile that I dedicated my career to. And it's an absolute miracle. The decision is miraculous. And as we go along here, I will share some quotes with you from this most amazing decision, written by Justice Antonin Scalia, one of the most conservatives that has ever been on the U.S. Supreme Court.
Please do.
Okay, you ready? It calls Justice Scalia, in his introduction, calls the sheriffs the Clio, the CLEO. They're the Cleos of this country. Clio stands for Chief Law Enforcement Officer. So now we had documentation from the United States Supreme Court that the sheriff is the chief law enforcement officer in his county. Many people have tried to criticize me for saying that. It comes right from the Supreme Court.
Mm-hmm.
Foolish people. And then he says this: the answer to the Clio's challenge, he calls us the Clios, must be sought in historical understanding and practice, and in the structure of the Constitution. So here he is saying that the answer is in the Constitution. And indeed, it was. And then he quotes another case from 1992, which was the New York v. United States case, where the federal government tried to force the state of New York to take possession and to store it in their state of nuclear waste. They said, we don't want your nuclear waste here. You get your own property for that. It's not coming to New York. And the Supreme Court agreed with New York in a unanimous decision. Mine wasn't unanimous, but it was, the other side was really, really stupid. What they said was just ridiculous. And I might read that to you if we get towards the end here. So he said, from this New York case, he said, quote, we have held, however, that state legislatures are not subject to federal direction, end quote, which proves the states are not subservient to the federal government. The federal government is not our boss. The states formed the federal government, not the other way around. And we delegated to them only certain discrete and enumerated powers. And Scalia says that in here. I'll read that too. The Constitution's conferral upon Congress of not all governmental powers. What kind of powers do they have? But only discrete enumerated ones, which implication was rendered express by the 10th Amendment. And the 10th Amendment is what we sued on, which covers states' rights and state sovereignty. So it's a beautiful, miraculous decision that I believe everyone in the world should read and be very familiar with.
Oh, Canada, I hope you're listening to this, because we would love our provinces to be more independent, work together, and not be held under our federal government. I think every province, at least a few of them, would certainly want that. Danielle Smith, I hope you're listening too, because I think Alberta is one of the more likely provinces within Canada to try and do that, to try and become more independent, to speak out more against our federal government.
And Paula, the huge problem with most governments is that they take power they were not allowed to have constitutionally or by your charters or whatever else. They're supposed to stay out of our lives. They're not supposed to be running every facet of our lives. And that's promoted corruption and greed and debt and overtaxation. And so, we've got to get back to the basics. And let me tell you where the foundation is for America. The solution for America is not if we move forward. It's behind us. It's in our history. It's in Independence Hall in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, where the founding fathers put together our Constitution. That's the solution. We've got to get back to our Constitution and save our constitutional republic.
Have you seen or gotten any indication from your federal government right now under President Trump that there is encouragement for that on the states level? Like do they want that, or is they still think that they want to try and overall control the country as a whole instead of state by state?
And Trump has even said numerous times that abortion is a state issue. And he said, and now what is he saying also about education? Same thing. Why do we need our county? We elect a county school board and elect a county school superintendent. Then the state has a state superintendent. And so I ask, why do we need to get the federal government involved in any of this? It's none of their business. We might be a bunch of stupid backwoods rednecks out here in Arizona, but I guarantee you we can run our education better than those corrupt politicians of Washington, D.C. Trump is now saying he wants the Secretary of Education to work herself out of a job and get the states back to doing their own education. If we're not going to do that, then stop electing all these school boards out here in every county and school superintendents, and just have the federal government run everything. They're not supposed to. It's none of their business how we do education in Arizona. Leave us alone and stay out of it.
So why do you think it seems to be such a hit and miss, or at least particular subjects are meddled with by the federal government?
Because they're corrupt. And they just want the control, just like they do with the IRS. Why do they have an IRS that is continuously bullying and abusing the American people? That they think that they can audit without probable cause, without any reasonable suspicion. They can audit any of us. And wow, 90% of the audits create more taxation. And so they have no cause to do that. And I believe every sheriff should stop the IRS at the border and tell them they're not allowed in his county, and stop the crimes of government corruption. And that includes the FBI too. And my dad was an FBI agent, but the FBI has become way too corrupt. The IRS way too corrupt. And if there was a simple and fair tax proposal, a fair tax, where this is what you made, this is what you owe, and nobody pays over 10%. Nobody. And they could implement that real easy, Paula. They don't want to. Congress wants the control and the power and the intimidation. And this is so unnecessary. And I want freedom. And so do the American people.
What could your governors do? Or who is the highest level within your state? Is it the state senator? Is it the governor?
No, it's the governor. It's the governor.
It's the governor.
Yeah.
How hard do you feel, at least you can speak to your state, how hard do you think they fight, and could they do more to retain the autonomy of Arizona and the citizens compared to, from the federal government?
Well, one is they need to cut the apron strings with the federal government. You know, they're also hell bent on getting the federal grants. Well, federal grants are nothing more than federal bribes. And they come into the states and take money from us and then build some big buildings and hire thousands of people and then send us back 5%. Why? You know, if the states would just keep their own money and run their own programs, we would not need the federal government for hardly anything.
Oh, and Canada, are you listening? Provinces, are you listening? Because that's what we would love. Right now, all our money goes to the federal government and then they trickle it back down to us. Alberta is one of the, I guess, highest earners within Canada. And if only we kept our money, paid for ourselves, and yes, if there was anything extra, then pass it up to the federal government.
The province in Canada, and any state that would do the same thing would be the richest state in America.
That would be fantastic. Canada, I hope you're listening, because like there's a lot of saying, yes, we're not the U.S., we're Canada. But quite honestly, what's wrong with learning from others in order to improve? Yeah, in order to improve yourself. And you guys have had a couple hundred years head start of independence. Like, why can't we see? We've got to see your data over, you know, the centuries. We now know like what we could do to make it an easier transition, a smoother transition, not only separation from the crown, but just more provincial independence. Right. I think there's a lot that we could learn from the US, not only the things that have worked, but things that have failed, so that we can do our own version. I think that would be great. Canada, I hope you're listening. Danielle, I hope you're listening.
And the American people and American leaders need to listen as well, because the Constitution only confers 5 law enforcement powers on the federal government, and they have stolen thousands. And so the only 5 law enforcement powers that were delegated to the federal government, one was treason. They're supposed to punish treason and investigate the crime of treason. 2, counterfeiting. Okay, that's federal. 3, felonies committed on the high seas or piracies. 4, in Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution, they are required, the federal government shall protect our borders from invasion. Shall. And then they did just the opposite the last 4 years. And no Democrat complained. No Democrat has complained that Joe Biden lost at the U.S. Supreme Court, where he wasn't supposed to be bribing student loans or students who had loans from the federal government. The federal government has no authority to do student loans in the first place. But you know what? None of them complained until Trump got in there, and he's trying to now bring spending under control. The Democrats hate that he is showing that he's doing what he promised to do. And so, and then the last one is violations of treaties. That's all they get. And then they must refer to the 10th Amendment, which is what we sued on. We sued on states' rights. And the 10th Amendment says the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution are reserved to the people or to the states. So anything that's not expressly written in the Constitution to allow the federal government to do something, they can't do it. But they have stolen thousands of powers, and it's going to take a lot to get it back. But I really like where Trump is going with all of this, and I really admire the work he's doing.
what are your thoughts? What do you think Trump's goal was with the 25% tariffs threat to the north and southern borders? Do you think the goal was to have it enforced, or was it to say, look, pull your socks up, you know what I'm really asking for you to do
He,
it?
it was a negotiation ploy. It still
Mhm.
is. I
Yeah,
mean, shouldn't Mexico and Canada and the United States be working together? That's all
I
we're
would
talking
agree.
about, and that's all he wanted. And because of that, the Mexican president, I can't remember her last name now. No,
Neither
anyway,
could I, but yes, I just know it's a woman. Yes.
but yeah, and I think she's a decent leader. But she said she would send 10,000 troops to the border. I hope they do something uh, to help, and to really go after the drug trade and really go after the cartels and make people feel safe again in their country. What This is the big problem that I have with any president or dictator throughout Latin America. Why do you think people want to leave your country so much? The biggest problem is your own corruption and the lack of equality in each of your countries. That includes Mexico. And so we need to start addressing the fundamental causes of people wanting to leave their own country. And
Hmm.
and that's where I think we failed, and we failed miserably.
Well, well, look, I can appreciate. I'm an immigrant, so I can appreciate why someone would want to leave their home country to another country.
Yeah,
My
and I don't
my
blame anybody for doing it. I don't.
Yeah, like, especially when you're coming from a developing country into the developed world, US, Canada, England,
But
like,
Canada has rules and laws about it, and so does America and Mexico. You try to go
mm,
be an illegal immigrant and just stay in Mexico. Go ahead.
yeah,
You'll
no,
go to you'll go to jail.
well, for example, so there were a lot of the Eurotunnel between France and England. So in France, there is the Sangatte camp. And the issue was that there was lots of refugees who had fled from their countries and they made it into Europe and they made it into France. You are in a safe country. You are in a Western country. You can get resources. But no, they wanted to keep going to head to England because England was the promised land as far as they were concerned.
Yeah.
So you already are in a safe country. You've made it to one of these European nations, but it wasn't good enough. So the thousands upon thousands of euros that were spent in order to try and stop people fleeing through the tunnel, which they try to do guaranteed every night, every night. And that's what's causing a resentment towards foreigners, especially those who even refugees. If you fled your country, I definitely recognize that, but you're in a safe land already. And I guess for me, that's what America is seen as when it's coming through, when they're coming in from the south. They
Yeah.
want to get to that promised land. Within Canada, well, they've come here. Immigrants have come here. Some have now turned into illegals, and we're just keeping them. We're just keeping them. And I think one of the issues that I think Trump is even recognizing is that the reason why he wants that northern border firmed up because he doesn't want some of these people coming into his nation
Well,
because
of
they've
course,
already made it to a safe
of
country.
course.
Why on earth are they now going to be sneaking through our very extensive, long open border
Right.
to try and make it into the US? So I certainly don't blame him for wanting to tidy up, firm up the northern border as well. And for us, why wouldn't we want a firmer border? Why don't we want to make sure that there are no drugs coming up from the south into Canada? It's not just, what's going to be coming down from us to you. What's
Yeah.
also going to be
No,
coming up
no
from the
question.
US to Canada? What's so wrong with that?
Yeah, no question.
And
And the federal
we'll
government has
see.
the authority to stop all of this at the border. As I
That's
said,
right.
Article 4, Section 4 gives them responsibility to protect our borders from invasion. And
Yeah.
so, yes, they're supposed to vet and they're supposed to check on anyone trying to come into our country. And this has been horrible. And the crime and the drugs that have been associated with this infiltration and the tens of millions of illegals, uh, terrorists have come in with them, and tens of thousands of terrorists. And then look at the crimes that they've committed all across our country. The Laken Riley murder. There's hundreds of those, and yet you still hear no Democrat saying, "Hey, we need to address this problem," or apologize to her family. No, they will not do that. They will never
Mm.
admit they did something wrong,
They
and so
can't.
yeah, this
They can't, because it would just open the floodgates to everything else that they've supported that has had a negative
good point.
result.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, they wouldn't be able to do that, which is unfortunate, because then with the accountability, well, you would get more respect for that if you took ownership of what
Yeah,
you did.
yeah.
And
There's
the
no
things that, let's say
accountability.
let's say were in support of it before, people are allowed to change their minds. And if you were in support of something a couple of years ago, but you've now seen 2 years worth of data and information, you can like, I can acknowledge, yeah,
Well,
I
no
don't
one did
support
that
this
more than
today.
Kamala.
I'm gonna miss that cackle. It's gonna be
Oh my goodness. Oh, no kidding. I didn't think anybody could be worse than Hillary Clinton, but we found her.
oh my goodness.
Uh,
Yes, I I don't know. Like collectively between her and Biden, I think they were just check boxes of virtue signaling, and it failed. It's 4 years. It's failed, and let's see. It's only a shame that he can only do 4 years, because I would really love to see 8 years consecutive. But I think the goal is what, 4 years of Trump and then 4 years of Vance,
I,
and see how that
I
goes.
think that's the hope. That's the plan. But
Yeah.
um, right now, I really like JD Vance. But we'll see. The political pendulum seems to swing back and forth, and nothing much
Yeah.
happens. But I believe that a lot happened the first term for Trump, and I believe this one is going to even be better. And right now, I believe he's doing a terrific job, and I hope that the sheriffs will help, and I believe that the sheriffs of this country should have his back, and he have ours.
Yeah. And I think so. Well, when you campaign on a slogan of "Make America Great Again," you're basically saying, "This is what I stand for."
Correct.
And yeah, I wish we were more, make maple great again. Like, really, I think we need it in Canada. We need that boost. We need that encouragement. When I heard his inaugurational speech, I heard it. I was like, man, that's inspiring. I wish my political leaders turned around and spoke like that. I wish they had a plan. I wish they highlighted the faults within our nation and that they plan to address it. But there's no recognition of the issues that we have. So we'll see. We have our own election meant to be coming up this year, but we're in a bit of a political upheaval right now, so we'll actually see what happens with that. But I think Trump forcing our hand to address the key issue of border control, border security, drugs, and human trafficking, um, I think can only benefit us. However begrudgingly we may do it.
Yeah.
I think is something that should be addressed with all nations to secure up their borders and give safety and security to their citizens and even visitors within it. You want to make sure everyone is safe and secured. Um, so on that note, Sheriff Mack, we're going to go to our supporters area. So we're going to say goodbye to the public. So just stay put. I'm going to play a little bit of a video and then I'll bring you back on. Okay.
Sounds good.
All right. So, public, thank you very much for joining us. Really appreciate your time today. And what I will do, we will go ahead and we'll see you tomorrow. We should be at the Bourbon House tomorrow for our live event in Drayton Valley. So if you're in the area, please go ahead and join us. But otherwise, I hope you all have a wonderful evening and take care and excuse me and God bless.